Go live. Hello, everybody! And let's start off with... Well, this is the Ironclad Naval Lessons from South America. And that sounds like I'm trying to sell something, but it really isn't. And I'm not saying Ironclad Insurance either. How are you all doing? It is... I've just realised I have not done this yet today, and also that the camera has managed to get out of position. Oh, it's a good day. It's a good day. It's a good day. I've just had a fluffy whirlwind in here, so you know that's fun. And let's see. We're all having fun. Yesterday was payday, so my monthly have an argument with various of my employers' day. Always fun. I hope you're well and all enjoying life. Good news. All my employers remember to pay me. Bad news. The employer who's got the most to catch up was still 60 hours short. But, you know, in good news, they still paid me 210 hours. So, you know. But we'll leave that to one side. The messages have gone in. The accountant has gone off like a small rocket. And we will see what will happen. But yes, this is the sections of videos when I'm talking about this stuff. Is because I want people to be under no illusions about what it's like to be a contract lecturer or anything involved in universities below tenure level. And even tenure level have fun. Trust me, my sister is tenure level. I watch the fun she has. You can, basically, the difference as I've worked out with contract is you exchange the variancy in pay, if you're contract, when you go for tenure, to having to attend a whole load of committees which you're frankly not even sure the title of, let alone the purpose of. But you know that they make lots of other people's calendars look very busy. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Knight 681. Knight 681, I'm not going to read that question out. You can guess why. But I would say I always consider it better to do a little bit of research before pontificating on any topic. Although my pronunciations, no matter how much research I do, still do not always get the right one. Hello, Michael Cooch. Member milestone, 7 months. That is nice. Hello, Steve Clarke. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Carl Gasberg. Hello, DG40. Hello, Bichon. Hello, Byron Newman. Hello, Machadostel. We did get Riley back before he was turned into a skinhead dog. Yeah. This is the sort of the scenario. It's a case of I have a feeling that's going to be a scenario where I'm going to be having to debate something at some point soon. I'm going to have to be debating it, whether I want to or not. Merkuch, have you seen a Patreon message about HMS Captain Expedition yet? Honestly, I have got Patreon up here, but it could be because... Hello, I've got messages. It's just updated messages. Woohoo! How many messages have you updated with? Apparently I have 3 messages. This is from Michael. Find the captain. Alex, hi, I'm Michael. This is from Michael. Yeah, hi Alex. I was at Salute the War Games convention today. And the University of Wolverhampton had a stand. Apparently they think they have located the resting place of HMS Captain and are raising funds for an expedition to investigate. And confirm the identity wreck. They're doing crowdfunding at findthecaptain.co.uk. Yeah. Find the Captain. Sounds like a fun idea. It's... How do I put this? It's part of this trend along with shipshape, which of course is the one we're doing at the moment, where increasingly naval history is having to be crowdsourced. I will put links to both shipshape and Find the Captain down below. Because if you, I don't know what it is. It seems to me that if we are to do any naval history, and when I mean naval history, I mean something big naval history, find a ship, do a project going and visiting ships abroad, etc., and we need any sort of funding for it. We either need to be really rich professors and able to earning enough money we can afford to do it without that, or we need to crowdsource it. And yeah, it's down to all of you. If we succeed in shipshape, it will be entirely down to you. And with the other projects going on, it's the same. It's entirely down to the support of people like you that we're able to do these things. At all. Now, go back to my page. Woo! That's cute. Ooh, the May patron 2023 suggestions are looking good. Basically the vote for that will go live Sunday. I will do it while I'm working. Let's put it this way. I will aim, Travelodge Wi-Fi permitting and allowing, for it to go live Sunday. The latest it'll go live is Monday evening if I have to do it when I get home. Okay, so yeah. So, I will say that the patron suggestions, I will aim to have them go live as a vote on Sunday. So just make sure the suggestions, and if you have them for patron, are in Saturday latest. And then we have very nearly. There are 22 minutes left on the vote for the June patron 2023. So there's 20 minutes left on the vote for the June 2023. And currently at the lead is Runon's one of Starling Gets His Dream Battleship Battlecruiser Fleet. Interestingly enough, I've just recorded a video last night on the Stalingrad class, so it could be interesting. It depends when I pick it. We've got on next one down is 12 votes is Greg Wakes. What would battleship and cruiser guns look like if modern technology applied to them? 11 is the Western Approaches Tactical Unit team by Steve Clarke. And Karl Hanshaw's Austrian-Hungarian pre-Dreadnought to Dreadnought development. And on 10, we have Fisher and Beatty are on the ship SS Dresden and strike a conversation with Diesel, who then becomes British. We have a couple on 9 as well, so we have some really close ones. We have gas turbines for ships but not aircraft in the early to mid-1920s. How does this impact construction designs? That's on 9. And Cody's Convoy Wars, a look at economic warfare between peer opponents, both historical and fictional. So those are the ones which are racing ahead. Thank you, Tanif. So, tonight's topic. Ironclad naval lessons from South America. And it's probably not the topic you were expecting. It's probably not the topic you would think of when thinking of lessons of naval history. But it is certainly one of the topics you have to consider because there are so many lessons in South America. And hello Wayne, hello HMS Verdun, hello Malaga, hello Bishon, hello Felix B, hello HMS Ford, hello Seneca Nero, hello Knight 6831, hello Master Dosselt, hello everyone, Amelia Burrow, Carl Gaswick, most of our money. we'll hopefully get most of the money. I think I'm hoping that the Australia expedition, we need to raise a massive chunk this weekend. I do know that we need to raise a massive. We need to be able to pay for the flights at least at the end of this weekend, and so we need to get to around about 8 to 9 grand by the end of this weekend, preferably more, preferably enough to book some hotels as well. Oh, God bless Georgia Savarov. Yes, God bless Georgia Savarov. Mission, I get paid every week without issue, direct deposit to my bank account. Lucky you. Let's put it this way. This is what I find funny. Patreon arrives fine. YouTube arrives fine. University X drops hours. Sometimes forgets to pay me entirely. University Y. It will arrive at some point in the last week of the month. But it never arrives on the day they say it's going to arrive. If they tell you it will arrive on the 26th, you can guarantee it will arrive on the 24th, 25th, 27th, or 28th. It will not arrive on the 26th if the 26th is a Wednesday. Never once has it arrived on the correct day. University... that was X, Y. University Z. Oh, they're even more fun. I love them dearly. They will pay you. But they will pay you, and then you will get a phone call a few months later when it's time for tax, and someone will explain that, yes, this university did forget to pay A, national insurance, B, all your income tax, or C, your pension contributions. And then I have, unfortunately, universities D and E, which are lovely universities and always pay on time and never any trouble, but they're the least hours I work. Bloody annoying. We've got a fair number of students in the UK studying naval history now. Shameless plug. Hello, Josvonk. Hello, Mike. Hello. Well, I think I said hello, Tanif. For the emergency brew fund. Yep. Excellent. Some money for the expedition will be coming tomorrow, but when I get paid. Although if I win the Euro Millions jackpot, I'll pay for both it and Japan. But you have to wear BT's best boy shirts. I have to admit, I've even put £2.50 on the Euro Millions. Look, don't get me wrong. There's 111 million there, right? So my theory is I can set up enough money that I can live and do whatever research I want for life, and also have enough money to potentially rebuild the tribal class destroyer. Okay? I think I can manage the two with the £111 million. Mission, I both studied and worked at a state university in sunny Buffalo for 5 years and never heard of anybody from J. Oh, no. You see, I've long ago found that any of the groups which are in unions do not get this trouble. But contract lecturers are weird because some universities let us, we are part of the unions and the unions would like us to be part of them. And some, the unions are a closed shop and contract lecturers need not apply. It's a fun scenario. So, oh, by the way, if you hear any crunching in this video today, it could either be wheat crunchies or it could be fortune cookies, because the very night my sister again tried to cook lunch today. So I now have a whole load of fortune cookies because I'm the only one who eats them in the family, and they sent 6. So I've got 6 fortunes. I'm not sure that's how it's supposed to work, but hey ho. Now, this is a Jack Russell, and it's one of the dogs. Well, I think it's a Jack Russell of some kind. But it's basically the dog which is on the Spreadshirt, one of their Spreadshirt models, which they have positioned up to model these designs. Where's one of science and technology? Antonio Banderas has been cast as Galacticus. My coach, would you build the tribal as historically as it should have been? If I have enough money for one, it will be historically accurate. If, however, I want enough Euro Millions to build two, you know, then I could really wind people up. Because we'd have the historically accurate in every single way tribal, and we'd have the tribal as would have been built if the general purpose mount had been proper dual purpose mount had been available. So I know 2 things about your sister. Brilliant individuals that can't save her life. This is the thing. It's not. She is an absolutely amazing engineer. If you want to stabilize a city or you want to stop the coastal erosion, you call my sister. If you want to build the next Thames barrier, you call my sister. And she is the best, smartest person you'll get. The trouble is, whenever she's cooking, she can't turn off that part of her brain which wants to be doing engineering, and that takes over the whole brain. You know, what we do. So, right. Today's topic. And I am starting again, but, you know, it's worthwhile. Let's see, between that and that is gonna be 14, so that should actually be, I don't know. Hang on. 16, so that should be, yeah, that should be 14. I don't know, if you and worry minutes, people are gonna want you to give them money. Nicest way, people can want me to give them money, but until I've done what I need to do with that money, I'm not giving any out. I'm British. I am very well trained in saying no in incredibly polite ways. So polite ways you sometimes don't even realize I've said no, but I have. Right. So, let's start off by talking about President Federico Azarus Zanato. Now, he is one of the coolest, and I mean this in the nicest way, absolute coolest presidents you will ever have in history. And, frankly, we could all do with having this gentleman as one of our people in history. Now, what I also would point out, everyone, if you want to find really good sources sometimes, and I discussed this a bit in Long Patrol that'll come out on Saturday. If you want to look up this particular Presidente, if you look him up in the English language, Wikipedia, to try and find sources about him, anything like that, you will find the barest minimum stuff. He is practically ignored. However, if you're English speaking, which I presume people listening to me on this channel are, because as far as I know, the channel does not auto-translate. As far as I know, it doesn't auto-translate. Then you will need to go to the Spanish-speaking Wikipedia page, get Google to do a translation, and then you will find him. Now, I have to admit, some of the translations are absolutely hilarious, okay? The trouble is, it does a blank translation. It doesn't have any contextual translation. So some people on it, including Alberto Bless Gana, when you go to his page and it's translated, it's translated as Alberto Blessed Wins. Now, he is absolutely amazing, so frankly, we won't argue about that. He does deserve to win. And I do have to agree that he should win. But, you know, there is a translation. Ghana gets translated to wins. I say people have gone as far as murder over lottery money. Yeah, I know, but I doubt that's going to happen in my family. Especially not when they realise that the will be already written, which will say, if anything happens to me, all this money goes to the construction of the Tribals project. Oh, and by the way, they're barring, let's say, £2 million, which will go to whoever gets vengeance for me. That would be the sort of scenario I'd set up in my will. I think, probably. Might not be sensible to do that. But that was such a cool idea from Babylon 5. Federico Errázuriz Zarnator is... Why is he so great? Because he's one of the few politicians who seems to learn while in post. Okay? He's a member of a prominent Basque origin family of the Chilean aristocracy. So he is massively connected. And he also managed to have 14 children. Okay? His children included another future president, a future first lady, and another future very senior politician. He was a founding member of the Reform Club in Santiago. And for those who don't know, Reform Clubs, there are a few around the world. They are exclusive clubs in the old sense. And they were usually liberal in their intent. They were about... It's liberalism. They were about supporting liberal ideology and parliamentary democracy as a rule. They were, to an extent, promoted around the world by British interests. There is a very important reform club in the in London, in the UK, and let's put it this way, to this date, and I have been invited a few times there by friends who are actually members of the club, and to this date, they like to have big speakers come in, give talks, discuss important topical events, and be a space where people can come together and learn in depth about what's going on in the world. So reform clubs are always an interesting thing. He fought against the government of Manuel Montt, which is kind of important. And after the revolution of 1851, he was exiled to Peru. He then managed to come back and, well, he worked his way up. And he became first Minister of Justice, which he served in the role of 1864 to 1866. And technically, he was Minister of Justice and Public Instruction. And then he became, first in January the 4th, 1865 to March 1865. And then September 1866 to November the 13th, 1868, he served as the Minister of War and Navy of Chile. And while he served in this, he started to pick up the idea that, how do I put this? War was a likelihood coming to South America, and it wouldn't behove Chile to be underarmed. Because he actually started paying attention to things, and he worked out very quickly that Chile is a very different idea to most other countries. And what is that difference? Well, for most countries, sea lines of communication are your external. Okay? Sea lines of communication are what you have to externally communicate. However, if we consider Chile, it's a lovely country. It's a beautiful country. But Chile is also a long, thin nation. Not only is it long and thin, it is long, thin, and fairly mountainous. If I get this terrain map up here, and I get rid of that, put that there, and I go, let's see, add source, desktop capture, Google Maps, yeah, there you are. Hello. So, if I put this up, just quickly, if you look at this terrain map of Chile, you'll notice it has very, very mountainous areas. Pretty much one main road running along it. And it just doesn't get much better as you go further up it. In fact, you can almost say it gets worse. So for Chile, the sea lines of communication are their internal lines of communication. If you think about it, the strategic depth and the ability to deploy troops to cover certain areas and to move people around depends on your ability to deploy by sea. And so if you don't have a strong navy, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of trouble. As Felix had just pointed out, Chile is similar to Norway. Yes. Comments of the 19th century liberalism. Yeah, the 19th century liberalism. Excellent. Reform Club, I have a good bet, sir, that you cannot travel around the world in 80 days. Not with my bank balance at the moment. in the nicest way, I've had to finance a book and now a university forgetting to pay me on a credit card. No. I have to admit this was an earlier part of the earlier discussion when when I was talking about the trip to Australia. That, as is usual, it's the case the difference between the people who are able to pay up front and hopefully get the money back, and the people who are having to wait for the money to come in before they can start doing stuff, mostly depends on how much money they've got on their credit card already used. And for some of us, this means that money will pay off the credit card, and then we'll put the stuff on the credit card, and we're paying off the credit card. And for others, it means they'll be paying off the credit card. Because that is the way naval history has to work. Most of it is funded off credit cards. But, interesting enough, Federico went, right, we need to defend this, we need to invest in this. And when he becomes president in 1871, his first thing is to do, the first thing he does, is put a bill in front of the National Congress of Chile to authorize the executive branch to acquire 2 armored ships, 2 armored frigates. The project was approved on March the 4th, 1872, with only 1 vote of rejection. And this gets interesting. The vote of rejection comes from the previous president. Now, don't get me wrong, the previous president is not a bad man. But José Joaquín Pérez Mascaione is... well, he's came to power because the person who people wanted to come to power wouldn't succeed the previous incumbent. And when he became president, and he was president from September the 8th, 1861 to September the 18th, 1871, so he did 10 years. Chile was not in a good financial state. Chile was having problems. And he didn't want to spend money on defense. And he had this curious idea. It's an idea which is firmly held by many in this world, but which I have to say I have never really been a fan of. But I will explain. The idea is this. If you don't spend money as a country on defense, other people won't attack you. Because what people are looking for when they decide to declare war is a fair fight, is someone who is armed and ready to fight. And if you don't have weapons, so you're therefore not a threat to them, they won't attack you, as fighting you will be an embarrassment to them. That's how best I can sum up that particular philosophy. So, he is the sole vote no against these ships. Now, don't worry, 1 vote no does not veto it. It doesn't. It really doesn't. Sadly. Because that would have been fun, watching Chile descend into civil war over wanting to build some armoured ships. You know, that would really give them an organisation. I'm joking on that. By the way, quite a lot of what a large section was heavy sarcasm. Some people seem to sometimes need me to tell them that it's sarcasm. I'm not sure why. The comments are suggesting this. Can we have a Picard face palming as the next chat emoji? If we could have something. So, Zaanatu basically turned around and went, Who is my minister in England? And he found his minister was Alberto Blescana. Now, by the way, here is something I want you to go and do. If you can track down his books, you will really like them, because he is basically the Charles Dickens of, well, some would say Chile, others would say South America. He writes some really, really interesting and really intriguing books and works. And frankly, you will enjoy them if you can manage to get hold of them. So I do recommend looking up Alberto Blescana. But you can really tell he's a novelist, because novelists have a certain habit. They always do their research. They always, before they enter a world, they usually find someone to be their guide, and they usually find another couple of sources, and they try and work things out. So instead of going, I am a historian, a diplomat, a writer, I am a really important nobleman, I am a pioneer in the world, I do not need advice, he immediately goes, hang on, I'm a novelist. What do I know about ships? Not really a lot. So he goes and tracks down. He goes to the directors of Naval Construction UK and goes, have you got anyone who's retired recently, who knows what they're doing, but is retired and will be looking for a contract, a consultancy job? And he does. He finds Edward James Reed, who's a former constructor for the Admiralty. And he hires him not to design and build the ships, but as a technical advisor and as a technical representative. So instead of him going up to these shipyards and trying to negotiate directly with them unaided, without anyone, he's got himself a guide to walk with him up to the shipyards. Someone who knows what they're talking about and who's dealt with the negotiations before. And then he goes and picks the yards. He goes and tours the yards. He tours about 24 yards, speaks with about another dozen more, before he decides upon Earl's Shipbuilding Company in Hull, Yorkshire. They're not one of the famous shipyards, but they're a good quality shipyard. They built some good ships in their time. At this point, the frigates were to be named Cochrane and Valparaiso, after, of course, Lord Cochrane, who is a naval hero to a large chunk of South America. And after Valparaiso. Now, the ships, they were to be built with a loan acquired by Chile. They acquired most of it from domestic sources, but also from the UK, for 2.2 million pesos to build both frigates. So, that means there is a fixed price. The price has been fixed before they've been even ordered. They can't be more than this one. Might as well decide to go on. Just think of the economic power 24 shipyards imply. Yeah. Just think of the fact that Britain had that many yards which could be all compete for this tender. Pete Dawson, I'm not sure why you've just asked me a question about Pinto. Pinto's not in this. I've just said it. These ones are Cochrane and Valparaiso at this point, and Valparaiso is going to come Blanco Encalada. So I'm not sure why Pinto's coming up right now. Hi, George Newman. Anyway, so the yard they pick. Earl's Shipbuilding. Now, Earls are a yard which are famous for really three things. One, quality work on a price. 2, pretty darn good at building cruisers and frigates and cruisers, i.e. cruising style vessels. Hence the Royal Navy built the Edgar class there. And 3, not charging the Earth. In fact, that's probably a problem for them and actually something to consider, because as time goes on, Earl shipbuilding actually gets into trouble. Not in this project. In this project, they could build, complete them, and it's all fine. But as time goes on, especially into the 1890s, they actually end up going bankrupt and being liquidated and bought. And the reason they go bankrupt is because they haven't got enough cash flow. And the reason they haven't got enough cash flow isn't because they haven't got enough orders on their orders books. That's one of the reasons why they're bought so quickly. But the reason they haven't got enough cash flow is because they don't charge, build in as much profit margin into their orders as some of the other yards do. Which means when the price of goods they're procuring, i.e. engines and things, go up, their costs go up. But because they've got contracts written up, they haven't got as much profit margin to absorb those increasing costs. Now, sadly enough, for those thinking about shipbuilding, the British government in the 1930s, at the same point as the Admiralty is going around trying to build up capacity and rebuild the Navy, the British government decides to start on a shipyard rationalisation programme, sponsored and encouraged by the government. One of the yards which is rationalised is Earl's in Hull. The equipment is all sold off, including a large crane and quite a lot of equipment going up to Kowloon in Hong Kong to help a shipyard there. And they sign a special covenant, which means that for 60 years afterwards at least, no ships can be built on the land which formerly the shipyard was on. That was signed and done in 1932. And by the way, the government still considered the law to be enforced in 1939 when they were looking at how to expand shipyards. There's about 24 yards which are affected by that. Just going to say that to put that one out there for those who think that the British government is in any way sensibly organised in the 1930s. You have, at one point, the Treasury and government going around doing a rationalisation of shipyards because it's the best economic and most efficient decision to make. At the same time, the Royal Navy is spending money and handing out money to shipyards to boost and improve them. And there's almost a race in 1933 to 35 between Henderson and the authorities as to which yard, of whether they can get yards to sign up to him first or them first. Fun times. Fun times. So that's our shipbuilding industry, shipbuilding, and they're a nice little firm to look at. They're one of dozens of firms which are worthwhile looking at, and they build good quality ships. By the way, some of their ships are still surviving. Always an interesting one, but some of their ships are still surviving. One of the ones that's still surviving, is a little ferry which operates on Lake Titicaca. So if you go to and look up the old ferry on Lake Titicaca, the really old one, the 19th century one, that is a ship built by Earl Shipbuilding. And again, that's one of the things which we'd like to go look at as part of a South America tour by Shipshape. If the Australia tour works out, we've got Japan, we've got South America, we've got Scandinavia, we've got all sorts of places we want to go. Lake Titicaca. H. Done looks up who is Chancellor at the time. Ah, yes, Neville Chamberlain. Yep, explains so much. Yeah, it does. Chamberlain had a lot of good and bright ideas. He was not always necessarily the best at having those ideas at the right time. Oh well. I need Iron Brew. If I'm going to keep talking about idiot politicians, I need Iron Brew. I love you all, but I do need Iron Brew. Hi, Jack Ray. So, then we've got the namesake of the ship, and oh, thank the Lord. By the way, you're going to notice something. There are a lot of admirals who turn up in very senior positions in Chile's history. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's a wonderful country. They're basically, every time they're run by a general, they don't have a good time. Every time they want to be run well, they call in an admiral, and it works brilliantly. Basically, Chile needs to adopt a policy that unless you've been in the naval service and you can't, as a former military member, run for government, because it's the same every single time. Admirals? Do good for Chile. Now, Admiral Manuel Blanco Encalada had been Vice Admiral, reached Vice Admiral, had served under Lord Cochrane, was the first ever president of Chile. The first ever president of Chile. Serving July 1826 to September 1826. Basically, it was found out having a good, honourable, hard-working, dedicated, thoughtful, commanding leadership style personality as your head of government was going to be a great thing. Unfortunately, it was then found this was a good, hard-working, enigmatic, commanding personality who expected you to actually do the things you were supposed to be doing, rather than talking about them. This led to a lot of arguments. And the trouble is... Okay. So let me explain. You will often get people, and I won't call them rude names, but I do think rude things about them, who spend their times talking about how nice it must be to live in countries X, Y, or Z. Because they always act so quickly. They get things done. Very quickly you find countries X, Y, Z tend to be dictatorships. So of course they get things done very quickly, because there's only one person whose decision-making matters. Once they're informed, they hopefully make a decision. And then everyone's going to do that decision and follow it very quickly. Now, if by chance they happen to jump onto the right solution, that's brilliant. But if they get the wrong solution, they're just going to keep doubling down on it, because doing anything else admits that the dictator got it wrong. And let's be honest, admitting a dictator got something wrong is a quick way to die. It's painful, but it is a quick way to die. So, in comparison, democracy, any form of democracy, where you have people arguing over whether or not a solution is the right course to do, can look slow, can look messy, can look divided, can look all those things which just are so unappealing. But that's the point. Because having that debate... Where's your wife? Sorry. Magpie looking at me. Go away, Magpie. Having that debate is what allows you to discuss and find out what the best solution is. Thank you, Jack Ray. Having that debate... 5 memberships, very kind of you. Having that debate is what allows you to basically work out the rough edges of most solutions. And you can tell when governments and countries and democracies don't have those debates. In the nicest way, something which I found quite disturbing in modern politics is that now some things are so important there aren't debates. If we consider during COVID, the vast majority of the debates in governments didn't happen like it was supposed to. It wasn't the sensible voices in the middle having a discussion, which would have been helpful. It was the extremes having their weird arguments, which didn't help anyone. Because that means you're either over that way or over that way, and neither way over there is usually right. Because let's be honest, if you're that far out of the centre, you've probably taken a few too many turns on your path through the high street of modern political life. I'm sorry, but you have. The vast majority of humanity fits in the conservative, liberal, socialist sort of small c, small l, small s centre of the bell curve of human politics, and there's a reason for that. That tends to be where the sensible, workable solutions are found that people will go along with. Well, the thing was, they didn't not like him. They actually agreed with a lot of what he was saying. They just didn't like him being in charge of them and telling them to do it, because then that meant they didn't really get to have a debate. And none of them got to pontificate much. So what ended up a load of arguments over organisation and order. And he ends up going, look, I'm just going to quit and go. And that's actually when it sets the standard for presidents being elected and put in post in September in Chile, which is why the vast majority of them we'll see are September 18th to September the 18th of whatever year. Usually it's that, and that's why a few people end up, there's some interesting history around the September the 18th. Anyway, which we'll get into some of it later. So he goes, they set up their system, but they don't stop using him because he's an honourable man who believes in his country, and because they actually do like him and want to use him, he still gets used to run the Navy and organise things. And he's really, really good at those roles. And the same solutions which he was articulating as president, which they found problematic to take, they were happy to take when he was head of the Navy. It's amazing. Waiting to build the science technology. In simple terms, chaos drives innovation. I usually prefer to use the phrase discussion drives innovation, but yeah. If you can actually have discussions and debates, things are good. If you sit down with people who disagree with you on politics and you go, I can't talk to you because you disagree with me, then you shouldn't be anywhere near a seat of power in my mind. It doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you come from. You need to be able to talk, you need to be able to listen, you need to at least be able to allow the mental thinking to understand where the other side is coming from. You can try and work out what their logic. Yes, you can argue if they are from the true extremes. You can say I cannot understand how that person's got to that extreme in a position. But honestly, sadly enough, usually I can. I don't agree with where they've ended up, but I can see how their chain of thought has driven them to that point. Because, honestly, if you look at quite a lot of the modern world, there are issues. There are issues out there. There's the... I would... Again, getting into this, and this is getting into politics, but this is also something you have in time. You have an advantage in this Chilean period, and you have disadvantage with all these presents are sort of paying off. The news cycle now is 24 hours a day. In this period, the news cycle was maybe 48, 72 hours. In that, by the time the information reached the news and was published, it was probably confirmed, digested, and it would be serious stuff. And the thing is, if you're only publishing a newspaper, even if it's a newspaper that's being published daily, that means you're using 24 hours worth of information that's been received goes into you deciding from before that newspaper. But if you're thinking about websites which are updated by the minute, it could be the information from the last 60 seconds, which could not be accurate at all, and could lead to websites and stories about, you know, battleships, battleships with 5-inch long guns, when A, you're talking about a frigate, and B, the gun is 5-inch caliber, so its diameter of its barrel is 5 inches, not the length of the gun. And this is the ship name for him. It's a cool looking ship. But I can go better. And again, I can go one better thanks to the lovely Spanish site. And I have to say, it came up right. Seriously, every time I've recorded today the long patrol for this video, which comes on Saturday, every time it's come up the wrong way round. Now I do the live, and it's come up the right way round. Hallelujah. Won't go in the right position, but still, that's fine. So, this is it. This is design. This is their gun layout. This is the Blanco Encalada. It's got 2 guns which can cover the stern, 3 guns for each side, and 4 which can fire forward. It does have a ram, and it's certainly got a very strong design. The hull was built in riveted iron, divided longitudinally into 8 watertight compartments, counting the fore and stern peaks, with 7 bulkheads made of the same made of iron. The bow had a sharp ram located 2 meters below the waterline and projecting 2.2 meters forward of it. She was fitted with what was called a cruising stern of the time. The main guns and the main artillery aboard her and Cochrane were 6 9-inch rifled muzzle loading guns. Now, these ships, I'm sorry I've been quiet there, but these ships did not necessarily have the quickest entry into service. In fact, the next president after Xanadu, Pinto, tried to order them to be put for sale. Tried to get them sort of sold because, you know, to put the ships up for sale as soon as the dispute with Argentina was resolved. However, the British weren't interested in buying them. And actually, what is interesting is the Encalada never seems to be offered. They offer up the Cochrane for £220,000 to the sterling. British weren't interested. He then attempted to sell them to Russia, but it wasn't really what it wanted. And then, of course, in 1879, the War of the Pacific breaks out, and frankly, Pinto is told to shut up. And the ships are in service in Chile by this point. Everyone, 48 to 72 hours news cycle is quick back then. I can remember seeing a chart saying 10 to 20 days for California, 45 to Australia. That's a revolution back then, to think we can do Australia in 24-ish hours. I would say you're in terms of travel times, but you have to remember in this period we are talking about the rise of the telegraph. So that's why I'm saying it's roughly 3 days. There are telegraphs and there are those systems in place, and so information is now starting to travel slightly more by this period. Now, pretty much you have the telegraph system being developed and deployed around the world from about the 1840s onwards. And the transatlantic telegraph tables are being put in place from 1850s onwards. So this is what was dealing with. When we start talking about the 1870s, we're talking about that, which is where I get that figure of 48 to 72 hours from. Muzzleloader, like an HSL gun. Yes, they're muzzleloaders. Said they'd fire, and then be brought back in, and then reloaded, and fire again. No, there's no hydraulic ram or anything like that. No, these are basically the same guns you find on board HMS Warrior. In fact, there's really not much difference with them. It's still man with pole and thing on end of pole. There are in this period breech loaders are still being developed, and a breech loader which is improperly designed can cause a lot of trouble. But they don't get sold. And, well, how do I put this politely? The War of the Pacific comes. So let's see what they were packing when they went to the War of the Pacific. Now, I've put one 20-pounder, one 9-pounder, and one 7-pounder gun as a list of weapons they put, because that's what they mainly sailed out of the UK with. But they seem to be adapted and have various guns fitted in. And some points they seem to have multiple 20-pounders on them, and 2 to 3 occasionally, sometimes even 4. I've seen figures of them having at points 8 9-pounder guns on them, and the same number of 7-pounders. So it can be an interesting scenario on the gun front. Armor, we have 4.5 inches to 9 inches. It's 4.5 inches fore and aft. It's 9 inches on the arm around the citadel. Battery, 6 to 8 inches of armor. So 9 inches of belt of armor is below the citadel, is in the center of the ship, sort of the over the engine space, and then you've got the battery, which is 6 inches on the front, 6 inches on the back, 8 inches on the sides and the front, if I remember correctly. Then we have 2 different inches on the deck. Again, it's 3 inches on the deck over the main areas and 2 inches fore and aft. 4.5-inch conning tower to provide a, conning position. And bulkheads, 6 inches thick. Iron the whole way through. Wayne, slightly off topic, but have you noticed that increase in technological capability tracks closely with the increase in data transfer? Yeah, tends to. The more we can ask for data, the more we want data. This was all displacing 3,540 tons, 64-meter long hull, and 14.2 meters in beam. 6-meter draft. Now, this is what I usually use when I usually start to bring up HMS Warrior. Why am I using HMS Warrior as a comparison point? Because it's worthwhile thinking. HMS Warrior is a long-range, ocean-going frigate. She's designed for speed. That's why she's roughly 120 meters long and 17 meters wide. She has a large length-to-beam ratio. This vessel has a length-to-beam ratio of roughly, and I say this roughly, 4.5 to 1, which means she's a maneuverability ship. She's designed for fighting in shallow waters while still being deep enough to go out to sea. She's designed to be strong enough to take on potential threats, and she's capable enough to do what needs to be done whilst not being so great that she's going to be an antagonism. Also a bark rig sailing structure, 6 cylindrical boilers supplying 2 trunk steam engines, driving 2 shafts with roughly 3,000 indicated horsepower for a top speed of 12 knots or a range of 1,200 nautical miles at 10 knots. She's a useful ship. Exactly, Bichon. Chilean new Ironsides. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is what the new Ironsides could have been. And if you look at how successful and capable this vessel is, and it has history as the Lord Cochrane, you suddenly start to go, well, hang on. New Ironsides could have been really useful for the United States. So she's a balanced vessel. And again, I bring this back up. I'm going to drop it down behind, but I bring it back up. Because think about what we're seeing here. And what Earl have managed to build into this ship. Because look at what's in the middle of that structure, of that citadel. Can you see a conning tower and a funnel? In simple sort of things, Earls have put everything that needs to be solidly protected and must be solidly protected in one spot, so that the protection they have not only protects them, but offers mutual protection to everything else. Williams made an interesting point. Not quite what I meant. I meant pre-writing there were limited opportunities for the idea transmission, and add writing, then print, then telegraph, then radio, microfilm, hard drives, and now the internet. This speeds idea transmission, allowing Joe to leverage work done by Eve to speed his work and vice versa. True? Amelia Burrows. Steam power? Yes, this vessel has steam power. 6 cylindrical boilers and supplied 2 trunk steam engines, which drove 2 shafts. Which, if you think about it, is another interesting thing, because they've basically gone, right then, we don't want a single shaft, we want 2 shafts. We want 2 engines, 2 shafts. So if you have a problem with one, you hopefully won't have a problem with the other, and you won't lose all power. This is survivability ships. Not to mention inbuilt heater from the funnel raising the middle of it. Yeah, that does help. The funnel going up the middle of it does help. Admittedly, though, you wouldn't probably be cold if you started firing your guns. Now, after Pinto, and there are ships called Pinto, which is why the earlier discussion when I was discussing the ships, I was sort of confused. And then I remembered, hang on, President Pinto is the imbecile who tries to sell these ships off just before the War of the Pacific starts. And this is actually from during the War of the Pacific. But this is not a Chilean squadron. This is a Royal Navy vessel. In fact, 2 of them. 2 Royal Navy vessels. And an American vessel. And they've come to see what's going on. And what do you notice about all these ships? Okay, yes. Someone like you or I, who has probably spent a lot of time studying these ships, can probably tell the difference apart them and know which one's more powerful than the others. But if you didn't have that level of knowledge, things will be very different. Wayne, again, I will point out there is actually air conditioning in this design as well, because, you know, they have the gun ports. Those are air conditioning. Blackburn Maximus, why do so many early steamships have only 2 shafts at max compared to later battleships that have 4 shaft engines? To be honest, it's a kind of space in hull and design you're building. It's then size of ship you're trying to propel and the max amount of shaft horsepower you can put down each individual shaft without running into high maintenance issues. So it's one of the things I often say, if you want to make the Nelson and Rodney faster, you need to make them a 3 shaft design. Because if you make them a 3 shaft design, then suddenly their power is going to go, their ability to go high speed is going to go through the roof. Because that extra shaft, even if it's got the same amount of power as each of the other shafts has going down it, that is going to boost their speed capacity straight up. If you made them a 4 shaft design, you could possibly make Nelson and Rodney into 30 knot ships. But with a 3rd shaft, you could definitely get them to 28 knots. There's a debate as to whether they're frigates, corvettes, or cruisers, but, you know, they're all broadly speaking, very similar. Where's what decided technology? What we called 460 air conditioning when I was a kid. Full windows down, 60 miles an hour. Pretty much. In my family, we tended to call that 270, but we'll leave that to one side. So, this is her doing her presence mission. This is what, in a nicest way, one of my favourite presidents of the period, and I'm going to keep saying him now, Xanadu, President Xanadu, had been thinking about. He'd been thinking about how important for Chile it was to have the sea. To have access to the sea. To have the capability to deploy ships on the sea. To be the presence at sea. And I will add, as usual, I will be logging into Discord after this. Probably... I think it's a turn for Killick chat, but I think I'll go into general chat this week. And I do realise it's supposed to be Killick chat, but I'll do general chat because I realise there's lots of people who have questions about ship shape and those sort of things going on. So tonight afterwards I will turn up in the general chat on the Discord link down below, and I'll answer questions and chat away if you people like for about an hour. Now, where's what sign? What tell us this, but what speed could you get a 5-shaft nail rod up to? I don't think you could really get one up to much faster than a 4-shaft. I think you have, at a certain point, you reach the limitations of the hull design and shaping. You'd have to lengthen the hull a bit to get in a 4-shaft anyway. It wouldn't be much longer to accommodate a 3rd shaft and needs of that, but to get up to 4 shafts, you'd have to lengthen the hull. And at that point, you're changing, of course, the length to beam ratio, so you're making the hull more efficient going through the water anyway. But I don't think you get more than 30 knots. And one of the things you find that goes along with this picture, by the way, and the comments that come after it, are that it was very well received. Now, I'm going to add in another video, another little picture for you all, because you kept talking about the battery, and I think it's time for me to show you picture number 2 I have of the battery. See, I didn't do this earlier because it does keep doing this to me. Yay, that's correct. This is the inside of the battery. I'm honestly not 100% sure which gun it is. If I take away the slideshow for a second and expand this up, and then I just appear here. Not sure which position it is, but I have an idea, because if you look at the picture and the way it is, I think it might be. And this is where it can really get fun, so if this goes wrong, you'll know why. Hello, everyone. Right then, and it has gone sort of wrong, but I think I can... I think this gun, is probably, if I put this up above my head, the forward gun above my that's my right eye. So I think it's the forward gun above my right eye, because that would explain it from the pictures, because I think this position looks like it's taken to me from the most forward gun, and I think it's the forward-facing gun of the central sort of quad on this side. Okay. Hello. The pictures have slowly taken over the screen. Hello. The guns do look huge, but you can also see at this point the fact that they are rolled in. And they're the muzzle loading weapon systems. And basically, it would come in, and you can see it gets absorbed up the track when it fires, held in position, and then they load it, and then of course they go for it all again. And you can see the tracks it's moved on around on, which actually do, of course, show up on the drawing. If you look at it, you can see the track marks. I think this is taken from the center of the ship forward. So I think it's taken from somewhere between the two forward guns. Because of the shaping of the structure and the shaping of the gun position. Sorry. There we go. Now, I'm going to actually go back to this before I sort of begin the war in the Pacific. Well, in World of Science, I just noticed 90-degree field of fire. Disadvantage watching my phone. It does help when you have a 90-degree field of fire. Now, how do I put this politely? The War of the Pacific, otherwise known as the Saltpeter War or Guerre des Saltaires, and occasionally known as the 10 Cents War, in reference to the Bolivian government attempting to impose a 10-cent tax. Before anyone wonders why I'm yawning, that far too much Chinese food. It's also sometimes known as the Second Pacific War, occasionally, but you know, it's an interesting conflict. The battles for it are fought in, of course, the Pacific Ocean. After all, it is the Pacific War. The Atacama Desert, which is not really a place you want to have a battle. Let's be honest, the Atacama Desert is not somewhere you think of as, I want to go fight a battle. I'm going to pick the Atacama Desert. Doesn't really come up as a good option. At no point, if I was thinking, I want to fight a battle, would I think, Atacama Desert, perfect place for it. Several of the deserts in Peru, the mountainous interior of Peru. And for something which is a war, you're sort of thinking, hang on, how did this war start? Well, it all starts thanks to a secret alliance All those who feel like putting in the chat a little note about secret alliances, feel free to do so. Because as we all know, chat, secret alliances are the great way to secure international relations and peace. Because as we all know, it's secret alliances, alliances people don't know about, that lead to peace. Alliances which cannot deter, because the whole point of an alliance in peacetime is to provide security and protection and deterrence. But of course, if no one knows about it, how can it provide it? But there again, it's a secret alliance. Secret alliance. Hey, caramba. So, Bolivia and Peru have this alliance, the secret alliance. And they have problems with Chile, and Chile has problems with them. Now, this goes back to the Atacama border dispute between Bolivia and Chile. Now, Bolivia at this point, believe it or not, has a coastal region, has access to the sea, has no navy. So their entire naval war philosophy is to hire privateers. Yes, they're going full Goethe course. As unsurprisingly, it turns out privateers versus ironclads is not a good scenario for the privateer. I can't think where this happened, but yes. Now, there have been several border treaties and the Silver Rush and all sorts of issues, but the main issue is nitrates. Nitrates. Now, the economic crisis of the 1870s had meant that Chile didn't have the same amount of money it usually had from silver, copper, and wheat. However, this entire thesis basically presumes that it's the Chilean nitrate companies which bulldoze President Pinto into declaring war to protect the ownership of them and to seize Bolivia and Peru's saltpeter works. After all, this can be easily backed up by several members of the Chilean government being prominent shareholders of the Compañía de Salteras de Fábrica de Afgano Antofagasta, the CFSFA. However, there is some issues with this. The fact that quite a lot of Chilean's richest nobles were also invested in stuff, basically invested in projects in Bolivia and Peru, and they correctly realized the governments in Peru would probably, if there was war, would probably try and take the stuff off them, and Bolivia, under the dictatorship of Daza, would definitely take it off them. And also, the fact that the real cause of the war is probably geographical, in that there is a border area which all three states claim. And all three states claim to have taxation rights in. Can you guess what happens yet? It's fun. It is fun. And, oh, by the way, there's also the fact that Chile and Argentina both claim large chunks of each other. It's great fun. It's still to this day, there are fun in that points. And there's also the small fact that even with not controlling saltpeter and the nitrate mines, etc., Chile maintained control of those nitrate mines because most of it had to be exported through Chile. Because Chilean ports could actually handle the goods. The crisis seems to come about because of the 10 cents tax. And that basically led to issues. And then Peru tried to mediate in the conflict. Remember, this country has a secret alliance with Bolivia. And Bolivia decides to declare war. Now, at this point, you're thinking, hang on, Alex. Of course it's going to go their way. Let's be honest. It's 2 countries versus 1. And in 1879, the Bolivian army is nearly 1,700 strong. The Peruvian army is nearly 5,600 strong. The Peruvian Navy has 4 ironclads, including the Huasca. It has 7 wooden ships and 2 torpedo boats. This is a massive force. What can Chile do to beat them? Chile has an army of less than 2,500 men. They only have 2 ironclads. They have 9 wooden ships. And they only have 4 torpedo boats. Yes, but it turns out that Chile has what Peru and Bolivia are missing, which is a devoutly, avowedly naval tradition within their leadership. And yeah, let's put it this way. That means naval life happens. So it starts off with the blockade and battle of Iquique. And this is a critical battle in a naval conflict. It's also the sort of battle which, frankly, you probably don't want to get involved in. Because the Peruvian port of Iquique, and basically Peru suffers a lot of the war damage in this. It's one of the interesting things. Bolivia starts the war by declaring war. Peru comes in to back them up, and it's Peru which suffers, and Chile's which going, we win at the end. Now, Iquique was blockaded by the Chilean Navy. And, well, what happens in May 21st, 1879, is the Huasca, which I've done a video on in the Key Ship series, comes out and sinks the Chilean corvette Esmeralda. This shows, for everyone who didn't already realize it, that, yeah, armored ships versus wooden ships are not a good idea. Now, I would say, in the nicest way, it does also involve a little bit of a ramming. Okay? In fact, ramming is a key part of the battle. But ramming the Esmeralda doesn't work out well for the Huasca. It damages her. So yes, the Esmeralda has been rammed. This is not the Esmeralda I've done a video on, this is the earlier Esmeralda. But, you know, she's sunk, but she's sunk by ramming. And this, of course, is the sinking of the Esmeralda, you can see there. And you can also see the Huasca coming in and basically beating it up. And of course, the Huasca is a ironclad monitor steam ram. Then, is this one of those there are losers and bigger losers this battle war scenario? Strange enough, no. This is the kind of war where the sides, there are losers, bigger losers, and there's actually a winner. If anyone wins this war, it's Chile. And they win it quite convincingly. The Battle of Inique and the Blockade of Inique are critical opening phases, because the thing is, they show that Chile is going to go offensive navally. And immediately they fixed the Peruvian naval mindset on protection rather than an offensive action. And it's one of the points you have to consider is that at the end of the war, the Peruvian Navy basically scuttles itself in harbour to avoid getting taken by the Chileans. And you sort of think, well, you know, you're an honourable navy. Are you going? You've got two options. You are surrounded. You're under siege. You can try a death or glory ride out, or you can scuttle your ships and surrender. And they do go with a sort of sensible way. They decide they're not going to do a death or glory ride out. But at that point, theoretically, they were actually equal in match in the forces, arguably superior to the forces which were blockading them in. So theoretically, they could have fought their way out. But they didn't. I'm trying to... No, this is the war which causes Drac to talk about the Bolivian Navy being a bunch of floaty logs. Floaty logs would be giving it a improvement over what it behaved like in this war. There are many, many fine naval personnel in in South American naval history. It's just the Bolivians in this war are not them. And right then, the vote is in. So if you don't mind, I'm going to produce this, have this pop up quickly. And we have winners. We have winners. For June, 15 votes. Runon, Stalin gets a battlecruiser fleet. What is NATO and Western Allies' response? And we have, on 12 votes, in second spot, we have Greg Wake. What would battleship and cruiser guns look like if modern technology was applied to them? Interesting. Basically, what would supersized guns be like? Steve Clarke, the Western approach's tactical unit. And we have one 11 there, and we have another 11 somewhere. Or is that, oh, that's all four, isn't it? Yes. That is... Oh, no, I forgot this. Karl Henschoss. Austrian-Hungarian pre-Dreadnoughts to Dreadnought development. That is the fourth. So those are the four winners for June. Take care, Amelia. And bump it goes. The Peruvian ironclads in this were... Look, there's a lot of debate about them. The Peruvian ironclads were the Huasca and the Independencia, which were built in the UK, and then they had the Manaco Capo, and the Anfalupa, which were American, as you rightly say, Civil War era monitors. But they're still capable vessels, and it's difficult to get to them. But in a nice way, if you've got those two as defensive, how do I put this politely? The Chileans start off being 2-1 down. Okay? they start off being 2-1 down. And the Independencia and the Huasca are these powerful vessels for the Peruvian Navy. Now, the trouble for the Chileans and the Peruvians is that whilst the Battle of Inque is a victory for the Chilean Navy, for the Peruvian Navy, because they manage to drive off the blockade thanks to Huasca sinking the Esmeralda. The Huasca's sister ship, the Independencia, chases the Chilean schooner Covadonga through shallow coastal zones, and the heavier Independencia rams against a rock and runs aground in Punta Gresa. This meant that whilst the Chileans lost the battle, the Chileans had lost one wooden ship, the Peruvians had lost an ironclad. And it wasn't long before they lost the other ironclad as well. There is rain in the background, yes. It is April. It is the United Kingdom. There is rain. Then we have the Battle of Angamas. And this is the Battle of Angamas is an interesting one because on this occasion, the remaining Peruvian ocean-going ironclad, the Huasca, finds itself in a fight versus the Blanco Encalada and the Cochrane. This is not a good time to be the Peruvian. This is not a good time to be the Peruvian Navy, because the trouble is, whilst on paper you can go, well, look, it can spin around, it can do all sorts of things with its turreted guns, it can fire at all sorts of angles, and it can really dominate things because of its turrets. And it does have two 300-pound guns. So the Huasca is tough. They are 300-pound, 10-inch guns. Armstrong guns. Fitted in a single Coles turret. And Huasca had already taken part in the Battle of Pachua. And had managed to fight off the HMS Shah and the HMS Amethyst. So it was a battle-hardened vessel. By the time 1879 comes around. But the thing is, these are ironclads too. They have very thick armour. And they carry guns which are a lot bigger. Oh, and they're a more stable gun platform. Just one, the rain's kind of soothing. Only missing a hearth, a side table, a decanter of iron brew and a globe. Gotta have a globe. Well, you know, this is the thing. This is one of the points I do make to people when I discuss moving. As nice and as lovely as this office is, I'll be able to do all sorts of things. And I could have a really, really fancy Swiss office. Oh, USS Lackawanna. Yes. Please note, the Americans often claim they tried to bring about peace. Lackawanna is this small ship here. You'll notice there are two other British warships here, who are all also trying to, you know, demonstrate for peace. And no one's taking any notice of them. Because really, they're not there to bring about peace. They're there to try and protect their own national interests. And if they bring about peace, that's great. That's a bonus. But, you know, if they don't, then life doesn't matter. I'm going to have a fortune cookie. I decide that's better for me than opening up a pack of Weetos. So, I've cracked it open. My fortune says congratulations, you are on your way. Any suggestions on what that means? Can't get close enough to read. No, it's not getting close enough to read. It doesn't want to focus in on it. It's supposed to autofocus that camera. Not sure what I'm on my way to, but it says congratulations, you are on your way. So, the Huasca had, prior to this, been managing to avoid engagement with the Chilean ships which they considered superior for about 6 months. So, you know, it goes from May to November. During this time, she'd taken part in the battles of Antofagasta, had even captured the steamship Rimac, which involved not only capturing the ship, but also the cavalry regiment, the Carbineros de Yungri, which was aboard. The largest loss to the Chilean army of the war so far at this point. It caused a crisis in the Chilean government, which led to the resignation of Admiral Juan Williams Robela, commander of the Chilean fleet, who's replaced by Commodore Galvarino Riveras Cardenas. And it's he who designed and devised the plan to catch the Huasca. Now, the Huasca was under the command of, well, Almirante Grau, Miguel Grau Semenoro. And one of the things you find interesting about the navies in the Pacific War and in South America is often the officers in command of ships have ranks which are far superior to captains. So you're a captain of a ship, but your rank is, I am Commodore, but you're the captain of the ship. I am Commodore, or I am Rear Admiral. All right, and you're sort of going, you're captain of the ship. Okay, this is what happens when you have a greatly inflated feeling of rank. Or rather, you can't give them pay, you can't give them more ships to command, you can't give them fancy postings. All you can do is give them a rise in rank to reward them. Yes. This might explain why your steward is a commander of the fleet. Alright, sex eating or cookie, which never tried. I know, but I got sent 6 of these today. I have 3 left. Now, the Battle Angus is... How'd I put this? Rather interesting. They split the navy into 2. They planned to blockade both Callao and Arica at the same point. For this to be successful, they felt they needed to eliminate Huasca and her commander, because Miguel Grau Sermano is one of the best naval officers you will ever find in this period. On October 9th, 1879, it involved, they brought both their ironclads to there, and they also had 2 wooden warships as backups, and they also had 2 transports there. Grau believed he could evade the Cochrane. He was unaware that both the Cochrane and Blanco Encalada could do 12 knots. This equaled the Huasca. Huasca is forced to engage the Cochrane. And she manages to hold off the Cochrane to an extent for a bit, but gets severe damage. And I'll get into this battle in a second. But what gets worse? And worse for them specifically, is that the Blanco Encalada turns up, and so she finds herself fighting both ships, and both ships keep getting closer. Now, at 08:30 hours, the distance between the Cochrane, well, let's put it this way. On the 8th of October, Huasca was searching the bay, or 0100 hours, searched the bay without encountering any targets. And, she came upon up with Union, which was her supporting ship, at 0300 hours. Both resumed their northward heading. At this point, lookouts on the Blanco Encalada saw the smoke columns on the horizon. At the same time, Grau, who is in charge, remember, of the Huasca, is informed that there were 3 smoke columns to north. Now, at this point, the Peruvian ships turned back south when they spotted each other. And the commander aboard Blanco Encalada, Commodore Galvano Riveras Cardenas, orders a speed reduction to make Grau think it was possible to turn back north and sail for Peru. He tries to trap him. At 0540 hours, both of the Peruvian ships began to slowly turn north once again. At this point, Riveras increased the speed of Blanco Encalada to get closer to the Peruvians and discourage Grau from turning back south. At 0715 hours, when they were steaming northward, the 2 Peruvian vessels spotted smoke columns ahead. And this was Latour's division. Now, Latour's division, under Commander Juan José Latour, of course, has the Almirante Cochrane in it. So you have the 1st Division under Commodore Galvano Riveras Cardenas, which has the Blanco Encalada, the Virginia de Covadonga, which is a wooden schooner, and the transport, the Matias Corsino. And you have the 2nd Division under Commander Juan José Latour, which includes the Almirante Cochrane, the corvette, the O'Higgins, under Jorge Montt Alvarez, who is an interesting gentleman to note and is going to come back as quite important later on during the Chilean Civil War. So remember that name, Jorge Montt Alvarez. And then a gun transport, the Loa, under Lieutenant Captain Javier Molinas Garcia. At this point, since the Peruvian Union vessel could manage 13 knots, she was able to steer northeastward and escape, but the Huasca had to maintain course and fight. And this is what the whole Chilean plan had been about. Getting the Huasca surrounded. She's their only really active ironclad. At 08:30 hours, the gap between the two vessels, the Huasca and the Blanco Encalada, had reduced to 3,000 meters. Cochrane is closing too. At 09:25 hours, Grau opened fire over Cochrane, beginning the engagement. He's trying to push past Cochrane. Latour doesn't answer. Focuses on getting closer. And on trying to approach Huasca from its stern. At about 09:40 hours, now at a range of 2,200 meters, Cochrane opened fire. Remember, an hour and 10 minutes ago, Blanco Encalada had been down to 3,000 meters and was getting closer. Cochrane was the more distant vessel at that point. It's now down to 2,200 meters. So imagine how close the Blanco Encalada is getting. And still holding her fire. Her three starboard cannons, now these are Cochrane's cannons, managed to damage the monitor right from the start. Their very first shot, in the luckiest of the jammy shots ever known to mankind, the first three shots, the very first shot bursts into Huasca's turret thanks to their very nice Palliser-type armor-piercing rounds, and wounds the 12 crew members manning the 300-pound gunnons. Pretty much knocks out the best gunners straight away. Another shot perforates the armour just above the waterline, cutting left rudder chain, meaning Huasca was temporarily adrift. And the third shot didn't exactly cause no damage either. Meanwhile, Cochrane herself was getting little damage, and Huasca was concentrating on her and ignoring the Blanco Encalada, which is very, very silly if you think about it. At this point, the Huasca was listening to hard to starboard and was hampered by a deformation in the hull, which had, of course, been a legacy of their ramming of the Esmeralda in Inque 5 months previously. However, they still managed, within 10 minutes, to get an emergency rudder up. Sorry, why did I say river? And hello, Jacob. At 1000 hours, a shot from the Cochrane actually struck the bridge cabin, which killed Admiral Grau and his adjutant, Diego Fierro. Command at this point falls to Captain Elias Aguirre, who's in the turret. By this time, Huasca's stern was on fire, as 2 more shells had penetrated from the rear and shattered the rudder wheel. The forecastle is also devastated. And the gunners, under command of Lieutenant Captain Gaunoa, were causing heavy casualties amongst the Peruvian crew. At 10:10 hours, the Huasca's flag was brought down for the first time by the intense gunfire. At this point, Latour orders a ceasefire because he believes the ship had surrendered. However, the monitor does keep firing, and eventually an officer manages to get the flag hoisted again, so they resume combat. At 10:22 hours, Blanco Encalada enters the fray, or rather starts to fight. She's now got the range down to 200 meters. Okay? At 8:30 hours, she was at 3,000 meters. She has, without being engaged at any point, managed to reduce that by 2,800 meters over the period of just under 2 hours. That's been creeping death. This shot killed almost all the sailors within and in the turret and damaged the rightmost cannon. Another shot from the Cochrane passed through the officers' quarters and wrecked the emergency rudder station, which had been disabled twice before. And the Huasca is now just sailing in a sort of circle to starboard. When rudder is again under control, Aguirre tries to ram the Cochrane. Latour is also trying to maneuver the Cochrane to ram the Huasca. But the Peruvian ironclad the Huasca decides to veer to port, and both ships manage to pass each other by. Another projectile, this probably fired from the Blanco Encalada again, pierced Huasca's turret 12 minutes later, which killed everyone inside finally, including Captain Aguirre. Commandership then goes to Lieutenant Pedro Gazon, who decides to have a meeting with the remaining officers, and they decide to scuttle the ship rather than allow it to be captured. Very brave people, the Peruvian Navy. At 10:54 hours, the order is given to evacuate the wounded from the engine room and open the main condensator to scuttle the ship and to prevent its capture. Not really the most efficient way to go about it, but I can see why they chose it. At 10:55 hours, Huasca's flag chain was caught a second time by the intense gunfire, and the Chilean warships decided to stop firing when they noticed that she was decreasing speed and muster their boarding parties. So at 11:08 hours, about how do I put this politely? 11:08 hours, about 8 hours after both sides had first seen each other, a naval party of Chilean sailors boards the Huasca without resistance. They managed to close the main condensator water leaks when there's just 1.2 liters of water, 1.2 meters of water in the engine. Sorry, I said liters, didn't I? And managed to extinguish the fires while the prisoners were transported to their ships. Pedro Gazon, the acting commander at this point, points out to the Chilean officers that the flag was on the deck together with the chain because they'd been cut off by the enemy shots. Thus, the flag was never brought down, nor had the ship been surrendered by the Peruvians. So they had not surrendered, so they were not dishonoured. One of the Chilean officers observed that something similar had happened to the Chilean ship, the Magdalenas. But this point, the Independencia has managed to do herself out of the war by bashing into a rock, because rock beats iron. And now the Huasca is captured. And the death of Admiral Grau. This is the point at which the Chilean Navy basically has achieved uncontested dominance of the naval war. And as you can guess, the war pretty much turns out as you'd expect from that point. Does 200 meters still count as cannon range and not just being within boarding range? 200 meters counts as... So, do you want your humans to be served as diced or minced? Let's put it this way. At that range, if you're firing with those guns, they pierce the armor, there isn't anything left. The kinetic energy coming into the ship is just... And your armor's not going to stop the shells. There's no chance. And then we have, of course, the blockade of Callao and Arica, which are the important sort of continuations of this. Now, the blockade of Callao and the blockade of Arica are interesting. The blockade of Arica is carried out by Cochrane, Caledonia, and probably, and I'll say this probably, because I'm guessing it's probably the lower. And the reason I guess is because they know it's an armed ship, they're just not sure which one it is. And the fact is, the lower had been the one with that division at the previous battle. Night fighting range. It is for ships. It is for ships. It is night fighting range. Now, the Arica itself is relatively well defended. It's got 4 batteries, and including one on a bluff and 3 others built into sand and turf to fire at any ships which try and get close. And lots of foreign ships observe the blockade, but it's actually kind of an interesting scenario because, well, at this point the Chileans have controlled the waters, so they have time. And they get to decide the pace of the war. The moment you can control the logistics, it's the controlling the pace of the war. It's the Peninsular campaign all over again. It's, when do we want to move? The moment the blockade starts to take place, the Peruvians move in reinforcements to secure Arica. They send in an extra 2,000 reinforcements to bring the garrison up to 8,000 personnel. And then the Chileans don't turn up. Basically, the Peruvians strengthen the garrison to almost 8,000 personnel on the 13th of December, 1879. The Peruvians don't turn up till about June 1800. At which point, a city which is dependent upon the movement of goods by sea for most of its food and most of its wealth, is pretty much bankrupt and in severe issues. Sorry, fly. Not sure where they got in. I'm presuming there's a hole somewhere in the wall I'm going to have to plug. Anyway, and most of the people are starving. So, yeah. So, that's the blockade of Arica. And then there's the blockade of Callao. Now, Callao is the primary port of Peru. It's located 8 miles from the capital city of Lima, and it's where their primary naval base was. Now, here is the interesting thing. The blockade begins on the 10th of April, 1880, and it lasts until January the 17th, 1881. And immediately again, the Peruvians reinforce it, because this is going to be where the Chileans are going to come from. They're going to come from the sea. Lima is captured by Chilean land forces, which haven't come from the sea, on December the 17th, 1880. And when the Peruvian Navy gets word of this, they scuttle all the ships that reside in Callao port. The city falls itself a month later, on the January 17th, 1881. And that is the victory for Chile, and why Chile wins the Pacific War. Its organization. Mission. The Peruvians had a 20-inch Dow Green Rodman cast iron smoothbore cannon from the United States for defense of the harbor. 2 others from the U.S. Army survive on display in Brooklyn and Sandy Hook. 20-inch Rodman was possessed once after the U.S. Civil War in New York Harbor. The cannonball flew 4 miles. Yeah. They have some good guns. Chile, as part of its war reparations, actually also seizes the Biblioteca Nacional de Peru, taking 45,000 books. Although there are some contestations that it was actually sold by Peruvians to get it away from the Chileans, but leave that to one side. They had issues with it, some of it, and well, one of the interesting people is that the then Minister of the Interior at the time, Jose Manuel Balmaceda, who's going to come up in a bit in the Chilean Civil War when he's president, is actually questioned in the Chilean Congress by Augusto Mate Perez on the opprobrious and humiliating shipments of Peruvian cultural assets. It's the interesting things of the debates in the Chilean government. The fact that they do decide that they don't want to take things too far. Now, if she'd just been involved in this war, it would have been something. But the Blanco Encalada is also the first ever vessel to be sunk by self-propelled torpedoes. Well, armoured vessel to be sunk by self-propelled torpedoes. She's the first ever vessel to be so dealt with. And this is done in a slightly more random bit of naval history, because the Chilean Civil War of 1891. How do I put it politely? I need another drink. I've run out of water today. I have drunk all 3 water bottles. So, for those who think all I do is sit here and drink iron brew, I'm sorry, I don't. I'm now having my iron brew. The Civil War... How do I put this? So, you've got really 2 factions in the Chilean government. And when the Civil War breaks out, it's about 10 years later. Okay? They've had peace for a time, and what is interesting is a lot of the same names turn up in the Civil War as fought in the War of the Pacific. And one of the interesting things is it turns into an almost war of the Navy versus the Army. The Army splits its support between the 2 sides. Congress and the President are the 2 sides. Okay? The Navy supports Congress. Guess which side wins the war. And the President at the time, is that very same minister, Jose Manuel Balmaceda, who managed to had listened to Congress as Minister of the Interior. Now, one of the troubles for Balmaceda is when he became president in 1886, his election was opposed by conservatives, dissident liberals, and by much of Congress, but thanks to President Domingo Santa Maria, who assured everyone that whilst he was for change and improvement, he was not for revolution, he's put in power. And he does attempt to bring about a reconciliation of all the Liberal Party in Congress, and to form, therefore, a solid majority to support the administration. To this end, he decides to put in representatives of all the different political groups as ministers, including two of the most bitter opponents of his election are given portfolios. Unfortunately, Balmaceda has a habit of wanting everything to be done in the most expediently as possible. His other habit is wanting to centralize things under his control. And his third habit is when he doesn't get his way, he has a habit of shouting and screaming at people. Okay, right then, so you can guess what's going to happen. He immediately starts to institute wide-reaching reforms without much consultation, as he believed that just by appointing these people and bringing the party together, he had the majority in Congress for any measures he decided to put forward, and he therefore didn't need to worry about Congress because they do what he told them. You always have to remember the president of Chile at this time is a consensual leader. They need to build a coalition and maintain a coalition, even with their own parties, to do so, to succeed. They can't afford, therefore, to try and be a dictator. He wanted to put massive investment into public works, school building. He also wanted to strengthen the naval and military force of the Republic, all good things. He gave out contracts in the value of $6 million for the construction of railways in the southern districts, put some $10 million expended in the erection of schools and colleges, 3 cruisers, 2 seagoing torpedo boats which he had in the Navy, Talcahuano, the naval port, was actively pushed forward. New armament was purchased for infantry and artillery branch of the army, with heavy guns acquired permanently and strongly fortifying the ports of Valparaiso, Talcahuano, and Inque. All of this was popular in its own way. Unfortunately, he had a habit of awarding the contracts for the large sums to his friends, of working round ministers, like the lovely gentleman who had organised the procurement of the Blanco Encalada. And he awarded these contracts definitely by favour and not merit, and kept getting critiqued for it. And the progress of the construction work and new public works was so slow as to find that some contractors had been paid the full amount of money, which was only supposed to be paid upon completion, and work had yet to start. I can't think why Congress were getting annoyed with this. Unfortunately, it then got worse, because in 1888, with opposition growing in Congress, the president decided to throw his whole weight of his official influence into the elections for senators and deputies in 1888, hoping that he would succeed in pushing in people who would support him and be his complete and utter personnel. Unfortunately for him, many of the members who returned to chambers, even with his official support and his influence having pretty much done everything short of actual open bribing for votes, everything short of that, joined the opposition shortly after taking their seats. With the Congress becoming distinctly hostile to his administration, there is a problem. Because according to custom in Chile at the time and usage, the ministers, i.e. the ministry under the president, did not remain in office unless supported by a majority in the chambers. Balmaceda was now unable to appoint ministers that be supported by a majority in the Senate and Chamber of Deputies at the same time, and at the same time carry out his policies in the way he wishes. In fact, the ministers who had been serving on him had been thoroughly upset about him keep going round him and not working with him. Not working with them. At this juncture, the president therefore decided that the Constitution gave him the power of nominating and maintaining in office any ministers he might consider fitting persons for the purpose, and therefore that Congress had no right of interference in the matter. It gets worse. He then lets it be known that in 1891 he plans to nominate and cause to be elected as his successor as president of Chile, one of his own personal friends. This brought matters to the head. And Congress refused to vote any funds to carry on the government. They refused to pass any bills, anything that gives him money. Therefore, Balmaceda is basically forced to enter into a compromise with Congress. He agrees to nominate a ministry to their liking on condition the supplies of 1890 were voted. This cabinet, however, decided themselves to resign when they realised the full amount of friction between the President and Congress, when they heard what the President was planning to do. Balmaceda then, of course, nominated another ministry not in accordance with the views of the Congress. Under Claudio Visuna, who Balmaceda intended to nominate as his successor in the presidential chair. At this point, he then refuses to summon Congress for the review of estimates of revenue and expenditure for 1891. Which point, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. In January 1891, the President decided to publish a decree in the Diario Official to effect that the budget of 1890 will be considered the official budget for 1891. This was blatantly illegal and exceeded the authority of any executive power. At this point, Vice President of Senate Waldo Silva, and President of the Chamber of Deputies Ramon Barros Luca issued a proclamation appointing Captain George Montt as Commander of the Navy and stating that the Navy could not recognise the authority of Balmaceda so long as he did not administer public affairs in accordance with the constitutional law of Chile. Now, why is this important? Because they've taken command of the Navy very quickly, and George Montt was, of course, at the battle we discussed earlier. He is one of the veterans of the Navy. He goes on to become an admiral, and he goes on also to become president of Chile. The majority of the members of the chambers side with this movement and signed an act of deposition of President Balmaceda. On the 7th of January, Waldo Silva, Barros Luca, and a number of senators and deputies embarked on the Blanco Encalada, accompanied by the Esmeralda and O'Higgins and other vessels, and sailed out of Valparaiso harbour, proceeding northwards to Tarapacá to organise armed resistance against the president. This launched the Civil War. At this point, Balmaceda found himself in trouble because he managed to alienate the aristocratic class of Chile with his choosing of favourites rather than balancing interests. And he had managed to put himself at odds with most national representatives. He had managed to annoy the great landowners. And he had also managed to annoy the church because he'd been pushing radically, at the time, secular ideas about government. At one point, there is also the London Times correspondent in May 1891 alleging, this is the London Times correspondent in Chile, Maurice Hervey, alleging British intervention as being part of the overthrow. Beyond the possibility of contradiction, the instigators, the wire pullers, the financial supporters of the so-called revolution were and are the English or Anglo-Chilean owners of the nitrate deposits of Tarapasa. Which was an important area which, of course, had been won and secured in the War of the Pacific. My gosh, has this guy been taking lessons from King Charles I? Potentially. Now, as said, they do manage to sink the Blanco Encalada, and one of the secretaries of the junta, and this is the sort of really interesting thing they do, it is a junta, which is appointed by the Congress to run the Chilean Civil War and run their forces. The Navy is the critical asset. And it's the Blanco Encalada, which is the flagship of the Navy and which is the key vessel in getting everyone on side. Now, whilst a large section of the army did stay faithful to the executive, quite also a large part of the army went off to the Congress. There is often a joke made that the executive was an army without a fleet, and the Congress was a fleet without an army. Balmaceda hoped to create a navy by taking over the vessels, and this is how he did get the torpedo boats, which were under construction, and basically pressing them into service with people who... Some of them were young officers who knew what they were doing, but they weren't really the senior officers and experienced officers. In June 1891, he'd ordered the presidential election to be held, and his nominated person was duly declared as president of the Republic for the term commencing on September 1891. But sadly enough, no one agreed, and no one supported it. Now, the two new fast torpedo gunboats, Almirante Condell and Almirante Lynch, are the key vessels which supported him. In European docks was the Capitan Prat, which was at that time the most powerful vessel in the Chilean Navy, but it was still under construction. It was armed with 4 9.4-inch guns, 8 4.7-inch guns, 8 6.6-pounder guns, 4 3-pounder guns. It has 11.8-inch belt, and it also managed to end up doing some interesting things, including facing off against the German East Asian Squadron at certain points, solo, and scaring them. So, yeah, Chilean Navy, always having fun. Once hostilities start, it soon found out that the members of the Congress with the Navy were able to bring in outside support, were able to build up the necessary arms, were able to have an army, and it was also found that the army that they ended up putting together turned out to be full of a lot of veterans of the War of the Pacific. It's almost like, how do I put this? A lot of the veteran senior officers and veteran experienced personnel decided that whilst, yes, the army's loyal to the executive, we're the ones who were retired after the war because we didn't feel like staying in a peacetime army. However, we're loyal to the Congress, who are our families. Now, it's not a military junta, Steve. It's not. So please don't. It's a political. A junta is. Oh, good lord. Okay, so a junta is just an expression for for a group being put together. Sometimes you have a military junta because that's the name. They call themselves a junta or a group put together. But it just means a council, basically. Okay. So basically, for some reason, Congress decided that having a vote of the entire Congress every time they need to make military decisions was silly. So they form a cabinet. And put people on this cabinet to run the war effort. So that's their junta. They do lose personnel when the Blanco Encalada is sunk. And it's quite sad, really, in the Battle of Caldera Bay. But in fact, they lose an armoured frigate and a transporter damaged. For Balmaceda, both torpedo boats, one is damaged, one gets home fine. And as said, the Blanco Encalada is the first ironclad warship to be sunk by a self-propelled torpedo, aka a Whitehead torpedo. But very soon after that, as said, they do go on the offensive. And pretty much things get better and better for the Congressional forces the more they go on to work. They have a force of 10,000 men very quickly. And they move south with the objective of attacking Valparaiso and then Santiago. The idea being they had to guarantee they had full control of the country before potentially the ships from Europe could arrive and change the balance. And as such, the Congressional Party didn't want to aim at a methodical conquest of successive provinces, but decided to crush the presidential forces at a blow. They put Del Canto as commander-in-chief, and an ex-Prussian officer, Emil Kroner, was made the chief of staff. The army was organised in the three all-arms brigades. Kroner superintended the training of the men, gave instructions and tactics to the officers, and, as said, was mostly working with veterans of the War of the Pacific. Del Canto was a thoroughly distinguished military officer, having fought at Tacna and Milforoz in 1880 and 1881, and was experienced at command. So it's not a case of a figurehead. They brought in an absolute expert and professional, and they've got someone who's an experienced officer as in their own head as well. As Kroner put it, the artillery was fair, the cavalry was good, the infantry was excellent, and the train auxiliary service were organised. And so you have the Battle of Concon. And the Battle of Concon is a loss for Balsameda's army. At which point the president decides to massacre people because he's such a nice guy. He ordered the arrest and imprisonment of all the persons suspected of sympathy with the revolutionary cause. This caused problem because the wider population was generally distinctly antagonistic to him. And then on August 17th, he went to the military college of Los Canas and ordered a number of the young cadets in training to be executed. These boys were the children of very senior people, of lots of people who were connected. They were sent to the military school to get a good education in a safe place and then serve their country. And they were executed at the orders of the president for suspicions of being seditious. This caused him to start to lose a lot of support. Because you have to remember, a lot of those boys who were in there, guess where their dads were serving? And it might not have been their sons which were killed, but how long? Then you have the Battle of La Placilla, where again, thanks to the support of the Navy, the Army, and the sort of logistics and supplies, the Army is able to advance and again fight Balmaceda's generals. They've got a well prepared, they've massed their troops in a strong position, they've got the greater part of the forces remaining for the president, but these forces start to dissipate, and the congressional troops, with their motivation, their better generalship, it seems, better generalship probably from the point of view of the fact that when you did anything which Balsameda didn't exactly support, you got shot. So your generals tend to have more latitude if they can actually adapt to the situation rather than fear of getting shot. Leads to the fact that the remaining government army is practically annihilated. 940 men are killed, including Barbarossa and his second in command. 2,402 are wounded, and the congressional army lost over 1,800 men. At the same point, Valparaiso was occupied the same evening, and 3 days later, they entered Santiago and assumed the government of the Republic. There was no further fighting. Now, the defeat of the presidential forces led to the so-called pseudo-parliamentary period in Chile's history, which lasted from 1891 to 1925. Now, it wasn't a true parliamentary system, like you have in the UK. In this scenario, the executive was subject to the legislator, but checks and balances of executive power were weakened. The position of president remained as head of state, but its powers and control of the government were reduced. In fact, the last powerful president of Chile in this period is probably the admiral who's appointed the next president of Chile. And by the way, Balmaceda commits suicide in the Argentine embassy. So, what was the wealth of the Blanco Encalada? Blanco Encalada. She was lost in this battle. She had been useful, extremely useful in the War of the Pacific. And she had been a status symbol for Chile and a training base for their officers throughout her service. She's very worthwhile. She had great worth. And in getting the members of Congress, the leadership of Congress, away to safety, she bought her country time. It's one of the sad things, as said, when Chile has a strong navy, They tend to do quite well. They tend to do quite well. I see, Clarke. It's Chile is not my specialist area, and I would say the discussion of it being prone to having a military junta in power is mainly an abuse, some sort of based on probably 20th century history rather than the full history of Chile. In fact, definitely based on 20th century history rather than the full history of Chile. So, yeah, I'm not getting into that one, but because that's not really the discussions here, and once you get into that one, you then have to deal with the discussion of the fact that the military junta, when they do rule Chile, are absolutely brutal and nasty. And if you're, once you're sort of talking, going, well, hang on, there's this junta earlier. Well, that junta is not a military junta, and then that side, the junta I'm describing are not a military junta; they're the congressional junta. And basically, that just means it's just basically being used a short phrase for council. That was when our Royal Navy and the Chilean Navy grew very close together. In the 20s, Chile was one of the most pro-British South American countries. Yes. In fact, it was during that period that, honestly, America felt that in any war, there were actual honest plans that felt that it was most likely in any war against Britain, the Chilean Navy and Chilean forces would support Britain. That was what the Americans believed. In my experience, quite a lot of. I have to admit, for most of my notes on this, I was using the sources from the Spanish version of Wikipedia. So I went to Wikipedia's Spanish version, got it translated, and went down to the source list at the bottom and followed through those sources and then worked through them. When I was looking for some of the political stuff, when I didn't have it in books around me. Because I thought, well, I wanted to include more about the Civil War in my notes. And I didn't want to go into a massive amount of detail, but I wanted to go in enough to give it sort of a background to it. What I will say is this: in my experience, when we're talking about some of the English language discussions of South American politics on Wikipedia, it's not always, to my experience, the best informed, and sometimes it's really interesting reading it versus the Spanish or the Portuguese versions of Wikipedia. Anyway, she's a worthwhile vessel. And it's thanks to, well, let's be honest, it's thanks to this rather lovely gentleman who really pushes the construction of the Chilean Navy, that you build up this Chilean Navy. Because having these ships and these big ships in service provides permanent postings for crew in peacetime and wartime. They've been used there. They're just the right size to keep going in peacetime and still be viable to operate in peacetime and still be of use in wartime. And that's meant you've allowed to build a permanent service, and you've managed to encapsulate a naval force within the country. And it's thanks to him. So, what sort of lessons? What are the lessons of ironclad operations in the War of the Pacific and the Chilean Civil War? Well, I would say the Chilean Civil War is torpedo boats are coming for you. And it's amazing how quickly rapid-firing guns, which were, or let's be honest, let's consider the Captain Pratt, the Chilean battleship on the construction, or Chilean warship on the construction, to be more specific. It's more of a cruiser than a battleship. That's powerful ship. It's armed with a lot of quick-firing guns already, because it's already realised you need quick-firing guns to counter these. And basically, the Blanco Encalada had not been upgraded. She hadn't been upgraded yet. And so people start to think about how to deal with these. But also it does create a kind of false positive. Because they go for rapid firing guns to deal with torpedo boats. And at the same time, they start to get comfortable with the concept of dealing with torpedo boats while they're outside of torpedo range. And it almost means the torpedo gets to an extent forgotten about. More a case of if it hits us, that means we failed to hit the thing with our gun, the shells. So it's kind of an interesting debate. What it also does show is the value of having the ironclads. It shows that honestly you can't get by. Bolivia had placed its faith in letters of marque. They get wiped out. That just ceases to be a problem naval-wise very shortly into the war. The Peruvian Navy had divided their efforts between 4 monitors, 2 ocean-going monitors, and two ocean-going monitors and 2 sort of coastal monitors. And an ocean-going monitor, an ironclad, a sort of citadel frigate, and some coastal monitors. And the coastal monitors don't get a feature in the war at all, which is one of the reasons why they find themselves quickly going out of service in a lot of navies around the world after this one. And the ocean-going monitor got itself trounced. And most people looking at going, well, actually, that sort of makes sense. Because it hasn't got enough firepower. 2 guns is not enough firepower. It doesn't matter if you can swirl them around. Not enough firepower. The torpedoes are not big. The Whitehead torpedoes at the time are not big. Executing the children of some of your country's most powerful individuals. What an amazing idea. Yeah, it was really, really smart. And it basically showed the value of control of the sea. But it also showed it's not just to the world, but more importantly to the domestic government. And it's one of the interesting things about the Chilean Civil War. The fact is, the president hadn't put the effort into understanding his forces. He wanted to have the power to dictate and tell people what to do. He had this great vision. And you have to, when you listen to the things he wants to do, he wants to build schools, he wants to build roads, he wants to build railways. These are all great infrastructure things. He wants to invest in ports, in the army, in the navy. These are all things which I like the sound of. Let's be honest, you hear, this is a constant refrain on me on these videos. Invest in infrastructure. Invest. Invest in infrastructure and education. If you do invest in those things, they will always pay off long term. No matter what, investing in infrastructure education pays off. But he doesn't use the checks and balances in his own system to ensure that his vision is delivered on. Instead, he relies on his friends. And when they don't deliver it on it and people point it out to him, instead of shooting his friends who are doing him in the back, he tries to shoot the people who are pointing it out to him that his friends aren't doing what they're supposed to. These weren't flywheel torpedoes, these were Whitehead torpedoes. Nice thing. Where can I find information about the true story state of the Revenge HMS battleship HMS Royal Sovereign after World War Two? National Archives in the UK, the Royal Navy did a whole load of reports about it. The Soviets kept wanting to avoid handing it over to the Royal Navy and saying, no, you don't need it back. We'll scrap it for you. No, we want it back. We'll scrap it for you. No, we want it back. Please, no. We'll scrap it. No. And, yeah. Whitehead did have an early torpedo, which was a flywheel torpedo, but it wasn't that type which was used at Caldera Bay. Oh, what were the torpedoes they had? Let me just check it out. I have notes, and I have to find my notes. Now, basically, the Amaranth Coral fires its bow torpedo. Let's find its Amaranth Cordell and Amaranth Lynch. They're armed with 14-inch torpedo tubes. And yes, they have. Their principal was 5 Whitehead torpedo tubes, 1 in the bow and 2 in each ram, in each broadside. That was weird. And yeah, they are armed with 5 torpedoes. New York Times, Battle of Caldera Bay. That's the notes I was looking for. Ay, caramba. They were only noticed when they were 500 yards away, and that's when they were engaged by the with the rapid fire guns. Nope, they're just listed as Whitehead torpedoes of the type of the period type. So Whitehead torpedo in 19 that period. Right. Yeah, it's a 14-inch 360mm. These weren't his flywheel torpedoes. These were later than that. So I'm not sure which of these the marks of torpedoes he was, but these are not the ones which are... These are the 1890 product. Yeah, 1890 generation torpedoes. Basically, they'd only had 7 people on watch, apparently, because they hadn't... the president only had torpedo boats, and they couldn't get to where they were. And they actually couldn't. The torpedo boats, to get to where the Blanco Encalada were, actually had to hitch a ride with a steamship. They were towed, basically. Guided the whole way and looked after the whole way by a merchant vessel. So basically, harbour security was terrible. I don't, make sure I don't think I phrased the original comment well, but yes, if you're going to be a dictator, at least know when you to drop your mates into the chief of the wine closet or something, if they're otherwise incompetent. I suggest that's what the Ministry of Sport is for. It's very difficult to anyone to muck up there, because usually all the important things are not run by the government. As a rule, in my experience, ministers for the titles of sport, culture, arts, anything like that, you can basically put who you want in there. Only if you're actually doing something important that's going to be on the world stage, i.e. Olympics, do you actually need someone mildly competent in the role. Right. So, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you found it useful, and thank you. I will be, as said, I will be in the Discord chat for about an hour, chatting away with people. Always look forward to that. I'm going to go to the public chat rather than the Killick chat, because this week, of course, we're asking for a lot of support for ship shape, etc., and there are people who might not be Killicks who want to talk about and ask questions about that. My coach, careful, the current ministers may take difficult to muck up challenge. I am absolutely certain none of the current ministers would watch this channel. Or who have those roles. The ministers who don't have those roles, who might watch this channel, will probably find it quite humorous. Right, my Maximus, did anyone try for protected cruiser primary armor torpedoes were inside? Not really, because at all times the torpedo was shorter range than the guns they could fit. And that's really the point. If you always arm your cruiser, etc., with the longest range weapons you can put into them. And any time someone says, you know, I have a great idea, it's a torpedo ship, and you sit there and go, yeah, how long a range is that going to be? Now, I'm also going to say, there's no live on Sunday, there's a premiere. The reason there's a premiere on Sundays, of course, because I'm off teaching for, well, course directing for Justin Craig over the next few days in London. So I will say, see you all next Thursday. Where I think it's the Hakadote, the Battle of Hakadote, which I hope you'll enjoy. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, 96 everyone. Thank you, Tanner Belaga. Thank you, Dan Freeman. Thank you, Atris Verdun. Thank you, John Shea, Michael Cooch, Joss Vonk, Blackburn Maximus, Melanie 1640, Calvin Gasberg, DG40. Thank you, Jack Ray. Thank you, Bijon. Thank you, Steve Clarke. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Amelia Burrow. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Peter Dawson. Thank you, Albazaski. Thank you, Seneca Nero. Thank you, Darius Rozowski. Thank you, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matthew Meek. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, History Vanguard. And thank you, Mark Harkness. And Peter Dawson. I'm not sure if I said thank you already, Peter, but possibly haven't. Thank you, everyone, for your support, and thank you, everyone, for your kindness and help, because, frankly, this channel wouldn't get done without it. Take care, everyone, and see you on the Discord if you want to join. I'll be on in the general chat in a few... well, give me a couple of minutes, because I need to go and... as I said earlier, I've drunk 3 bottles of water today, so, you know. Just 3 bottles of water. Oh, we have from Mayfly to present day. I'll be recording that on the 2nd of May. That's going to be fun. I've already written it. Why haven't I recorded already? That's a random question. We'll see. Take care, everyone. Thank you for watching, and hope you're having fun. Thank you, Ines Morrison.